Hi everyone. Okay, sorry for the delay in starting, but we're ready to begin. So I'm Taylor Meager, Democratic Services Officer and clerking today's meeting. Councillor Ali is chair, and so I will pass on to her to do housekeeping introductions. Hi, my name is Ali. I'm the chair of SSN. Welcome back. There are no planned fire alarms today, so in case of there's a fire, you go through the exit to cathedral area. Do we have any apologies? Yeah, so we've received apologies from Councillor Chris Davis, Councillor Philippa Home, Councillor Katie Grant and Councillor Hibak Jegna. Do we have any declaration? Do we have any declaration of interest? Sorry, I'm a bit nervous today. Okay, I realised the meeting. We were just doing introductions. Yeah. Sorry. Can we go around and introduce ourselves?
Chris Jackson, Councillor Philwood.
Jonathan Hadley, Councillor for Sutherland.
Christine Townsend, Councillor for Southfield.
Guy Colby, Councillor for Cotton.
Emma Edwards, Councillor for Bishopston and Ashley Down.
Councillor Andrew Brown, Councillor Hinkle from Whitchurch Park. And just to let you know, Chair, I'm going to have to duck out early because I've got a meeting clash.
Councillor Brenda Massey, Councillor for Southmead.
Councillor Freehans Redmond.
Councillor Chris Windows, Hanbury and Braintree.
Councillor Eddie Bishopsworth.
Dakota Delahan, TC Licensing Officer.
Harvey, Legal Advisor. Abby Holman, I'm a Licensing Team Leader and Policy Advisor for the day.
Okay, so usually public forum starts at this point, but given that all the 26 statements were on the CIA report, we've elected to just put the public forum before that item. So you'll move straight on to the first item on the agenda, which is the pavements policy, which is Abby Holman.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. Sorry.
Sorry, thank you very much. Sorry, I should have declared that I don't feel this is any sort of prejudicial or conflict of interest, but I have, I would want to push it on the record that I've met with representatives of Night Watch since the last committee, and I have been actively talking to residents and soliciting their opinions through a variety of things on this issue. As I say, I don't feel it constitutes any sort of conflict of interest, but I would wish it to be known. Thanks.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. I'm going to present to you now a report regarding the pavement licensing policy. This is a report that you have in your papers, and it's in relation to approval of a consultation for that particular policy. You have an existing policy in place, which was introduced during, just post-COVID to support the measures that were put in place during COVID for businesses to trade outside. This policy is a revised, a revised draft of that, which we're seeking consultation on. Apologies, my documentation has crashed, so I need to reopen it. You have the report. I don't propose to go through that in full. There are specific requirements. We're not obliged to have a policy as a local authority, but we do. And this framework has supported the highways team in determining applications for pavement licensing. This amended policy goes into further detail about the considerations that would be taken into account when determining applications. In particular, it's highlighting restrictions on the type of furniture, planters, heaters, signage, fencing and bins that the council might consider, and it's designed to provide a clear framework for applicants before they apply for a pavement licence, as well as an indication to residents, businesses and users of the area as to what to expect from pavement licensing. You have a proposed policy and a summary of the changes since the last one at your Appendix A and B, and standard conditions at Appendix C. There isn't a statutory obligation to consult policies before introducing them, but it is considered best practice. This draft policy closely replicates the requirements and considerations in the Act and statutory guidance, and goes further than that to balance the needs of other users of the highway alongside outdoor hospitality. We would recommend that policy is consulted upon with a range of persons for 12 weeks, and we've made some recommendations around who we'd consult with at a minimum, and have a policy impact assessment regarding the consultation at your Appendix D. Our request is that you would approve the consultation on the draft policy for 12 weeks. I should add that that policy consultation won't begin until after the May elections. So it would be a sort of probably May, June, July type consultation to accommodate for both inside and outside the summer holidays. So that is our report, unless you have any questions for us on that.
Does anyone have any questions?
It's not actually a question, Chairman. I've served on the working groups, and this draft policy is very much a tidying up and a practical piece of work. Since it's actually going out for consultation after the election, I really don't think it needs to trouble us. It does, bearing in mind we've got the CIA issue to actually discuss. So can I only move we approve the draft report for consultation, please?
Happy to support.
Could I propose a minor amendment to it? Is that okay? It was just to add in the list of statutory, under item 10, officers recommend consultation with the following, to add the council's own highways department to that. I think they might be quite crucial.
Chair, may I? It is actually the Highways Department's policy. We're acting for them in this matter. So it is a report of the head of highways, yes.
Okay, does that, in terms of where the final decision sits then?
It would be head of highways and yourselves as the licensing committee, because you determine pavement licensing policies.
Who would sign off the final policy?
Yourselves as the licensing committee, with head of highways making the recommendation.
Making the recommendation. Got it, thank you.
Can we formally just vote, Chairman?
Yes. Apologies. Should we vote? Okay, so everyone for, please raise your hand. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's all 11. Okay, next is CAA and public forum. Okay, so we're going to start with public forum for the CIA item, and we've received 26 statements. I will just run, I'm not going to run through all the names actually. For the members of the public, would you mind starting left to right with Councillor Townsend? Yeah, so you'll have 1 minute to read out your statement. Oh. Your statements, they are allowed to read them out by the summary.
Oh, you want me to read it?
Yeah, you can provide a summary. You don't have to, you can speak to
So
it.
I should say, if you don't want to speak to the committee today, you don't have to address them.
Okay, sorry, I didn't have warning that I had to call it up, so I'm not that good on technology. My name is Bernice Gollop. I'm representing Waverley and Balmoral blocks of flats. They're in the centre of the sort of Harbourside area by Brewdog and Pizza Express and that. We have noticed that there have been a lot of late night drinking establishments springing up along between We the Curious and our block of flats. The thought that any form of control is being removed by taking away the CIA is really upsetting to residents who live there. People have chosen to live in the city centre because they work there, they go to schools or that there, and they just want to preserve some sort of quality of life, good sort of sleeping patterns and that. And if the argument is that the CIA is working, if it's working, don't try to change it. And our biggest thing is that we think that the councillors should support the police in doing their job. They are asking for the CIA to be retained, and we certainly would want to have it retained. You put out a consultation and then ignore us. That's all we're asking, is that you acknowledge our views.
The next one. Yeah. Can you state your name, please?
Liz Burley, I'm a local resident. I do have a speech impediment, so please bear with me if I stumble. So I oppose abolishing the CIA because I believe that it would lead to an increase in approved licences for late night establishments, which would have a negative impact on local residents, lead to a rise in antisocial behaviour such as excessive noise, fighting, public intoxication, public urination, which isn't something that anybody wants on their doorstep. Noise in the area already travels quite a lot due to how the buildings are positioned. I can see that drinking establishments and bars are profitable and beneficial to the local economy. These types of businesses are struggling already due to cost of living and changing attitudes towards drinking culture, especially amongst young people. How many licences will be granted to new bars which subsequently fail and close down only for another bar to move in and start the cycle again? I'm aware that living so close to the city centre means that some of these issues are inevitable, just something I was willing to accept in order to get on the property ladder.
Can you please wrap it up, please?
Sorry?
Can you wrap it up, please?
Yep. It is obviously a residential area, but it borders a commercial zone, and measures should be there to protect local residents from harm. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one. Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Janet Wilson. I've had a family home on Queen Square for 24 years, and at that time Bristol Council had a policy of having mixed socio-economic groups and families living in the square and in the centre. And we took them at our word and we bought a family home there. Since which time we've had terrible problems with late night drinking, carousers, thinking that the square is unoccupied, keeping us awake at night. I've kept, for the years 2010 to 2019, I kept my own log and informed the council and police of all the activity. But in the end, we family, as well as being part of the neighbourhood watch, which protects the businesses as well, have had to deal with incidents on our doorstep ourselves, putting ourselves in danger, because the police are overstretched, and the whole idea of getting rid of CIA, which at the moment is at least keeping some monitoring and balance, although I understand it's not perfect, it fills us with horror. In particular, we've had bars opening innocently up in our back, and then suddenly they've got loud karaoke. We're not double glazed because we're a listed building, and we now have a child under 2 living in the premises.
Yeah, thank you.
So as families, as residents, as businesses, we all oppose the removal of the CIA, but we do understand it has to be improved and made more effective. Thank you.
Is it best to inform people they have a minute?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you have a minute to finish it up, please.
Next. Councillor Stafford Townsend.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, so I'm Councillor Stafford Townsend, I'm Councillor of the Central Ward and also the City Centre resident myself. So I think the CIA current form doesn't work. We've heard quite a bit in statements and from residents today about the issues that they have. Quite a lot of that isn't actually covered by the CIA, and unfortunately the CIA as it currently stands isn't doing the job that we need it to do. We're not able to trigger it as residential groups in order to sort of help prevent some of the things like the beer bikes, things like the Queen Square events, those sorts of things aren't triggered by the CIA. It should be altered and changed so that it can be triggered by a wider range of stakeholders than just the police. I think it also needs to be a wider footprint of an area as well if it's going to continue. So I do support where the officers are coming from with the recommendation to scrap this, but I think it needs to be improved rather than scrapped, because a void doesn't solve the issues that we have. A lot of the issues that residents are talking about aren't necessarily attached to the CIA as such, but that we could alter and improve the CIA in order to make it able to tackle the actual issues that
Can you please
residents
back it up?
Yeah, so if we could alter it in order to help protect residents in the way that they need to and also support the nighttime economy at the same time, then we can have the best of both worlds. We can support the nighttime economy to thrive as well as protect residents. Thanks.
Thank you.
Now we move on to the item side.
Thank you, Chair. I will apologise. I've got...
Sorry, do I not get to speak?
Oh, apologies, sorry.
Sorry.
I noticed you to come down. Sorry, Dan.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was really shocked to see that the results of consultation can be thrown away. If you're asking the public a question and it's not possible for them to say no, then you've not got the consent of the governed. I can see clear evidence for keeping the CIA. What I can't see are the problems it causes. But it's really easy to imagine that there are problems. If only applicants who can afford thousands of pounds on lawyers to represent them to challenge a refusal under the CIA are going to be venues that are opening, that means there is a bias against small and independent venues and towards big company-owned venues, which does not sound good to me. I really hope to see today a discussion around any issues that currently exist for the CIA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll apologise in advance. I've got the end of a cold, so I will be taking some drinks and breaks in the middle of my report, if that's okay. And I will try not to sniff too much. I don't propose to run through the entire report. You have seen it before, the majority of it, and you have had the opportunity to look at the consultation documents. So what I will do is run through the additional information that is now contained within the report. So you obviously are aware that 191 responses were received to the survey, and you have the information on that. You also have the 2 additional responses from Avon and Somerset Constabulary in support of the retention of the CIA, and from TLT, local solicitors firm, in support of the removal of the CIA, and have the analysis of that Appendix 2. Excuse me. That report was put before you on the 25th of January, and you deferred a decision on that day to a future date to allow officers to gather further information and clarification from a number of different agencies, specifically the police, some clarity around their statistics, Bristol City Council Environmental Health, the Neighbourhood Enforcement Team from the Council, and the Council's Public Health Team. We've received responses from all of the above, and they're attached to your Appendixes 3A to E. We also received data in respect of, from the Business Improvement District during this time relating to the street pastors, who many of you may know operate on the weekends between 10 p.m, sorry, that should be 2200 in the report, and 0400. And that shows a decrease in the number of incidents they dealt with between 2019 and 2023. And you have the full table there of that information of what sorts of things they've given out, what sort of help they've given. They obviously give a range of items out, such as flip-flops and blankets, and help people from premises to, say, the ambulance hub in the centre of the town, or sit with people if they're having incidents on pavements, which frees up security on doors to deal with any other incidents that might be occurring within their premises. I would recommend that you hear from the officers that are available, who have submitted statements. I would advise that in addition to the statements that you've got in the report, an additional statement has been submitted by your Nighttime Economy Advisor, who is also here, and that was another one of the requests that you made in respect of hearing from particular individuals. In terms of the information, unfortunately Dylan Davis was due to attend from Environmental Health, but he can't make it. One of the questions last time was whether Environmental Health had actually made a rep or not. Looking at further analysis of the data, actually a rep had been made, but it was made in such a way that we weren't easily able to identify that it was from Environmental Health. It was made by one of the officers, but it didn't include any supporting information. And Environmental Health have now clarified that actually they don't have the evidence to continue to support the cumulative impact area, and that's detailed in their submission in your appendices today. As I say, they send their apologies for not being able to attend, but you do have the police, Neighbourhood Enforcement, and the Nighttime Economy Advisor here. In terms of the proposal, you are asked to consider 2 options, either retain the CIA if it's felt there's sufficient evidence to do so, or remove the CIA and request officers and partners monitor and review the data forthcoming within the next 12 months to determine what the impacts of removal have been. If the CIA is removed, it can be reviewed at any point. It doesn't have to wait 12 months to do that. And I would just add as well, in terms of the process, whether you have a cumulative impact area assessment or not, the process for a licensing application is the same, which is that an application is submitted. If representations are received and not withdrawn or agreed, then it will go to a committee. If no representations are received, whether it's in a cumulative impact area or not, it must be granted. So if no objections are received at all, it must be granted. And that is the statutory process, whether or not you have a cumulative impact area in place. So you will only see applications that come before you in the CIA where representations have been made and not withdrawn. And I would recommend now, if you're minded to hear from the officers that are in attendance, if you're happy with that. Maybe if I start with the police.
Yes, I'm Neil Cutler, licensing officer of Central Bristol and Clifton. Ultimately, we've provided a report for yourselves for the consultation, and following the last meeting we provided some further statistics that were asked for, and they are all within the body of this report. But ultimately we are mindful of the mechanism for the CIA. We do support, and we feel the evidence supports the retention of it.
Thank you. The Neighbourhood Enforcement Officer.
Hi there, my name is Chris Winslow, the Neighbourhood Enforcement for the team leader. Neighbourhood Enforcement team leader. Responsible for carrying out a number of functions for the council, including looking at kind of licence enforcement. Upon the information, we were asked to provide extra data on the cases that we deal with and the information. Of course, one of the big focuses, as covered in kind of referred to currently, is around the hours at which the CIA apply. So that's kind of the main focus. There will be lots of residents that will raise issues around licensed premises, be it to do with the licence conditions, tables and chairs, noise, etc. Events that go on, but kind of the focus is, on the information provided is the late night noise that is occurring after 11 o'clock at night. So a lot of the information there provided, the stats in relation to that noise complaints relates to that late night noise after 11 o'clock and that disturbance. That information has also been shared with Environmental Health, so they were to make their statement to the the committee today. And in addition, officers will also carry out a number of visits and kind of be proactive. One of the biggest things one of the comments around extending the area was very noticeable is the number of dead spaces. I think the concern from the neighbourhood enforcement team around the city centre areas. That does leave potential areas where maybe crime disorder could be vulnerabilities. There's also a factor from a water safety aspect. When you might be moving around, it's quite an extended area for the CIA, of which there are a number of quiet areas where illicit activity could happen, or where those vulnerable people could be taken advantage of. As it stands, with the information that comes through to us, we will not be in a position to support the continuation of the CIA as it stands.
Thank you, and Carly Heath, the Nighttime Economy Advisor.
Hello, I'm Carly Heath, I'm the Nighttime Economy Advisor for Bristol. My job is to sit somewhere between the council and the nighttime, of which in Bristol 41% of our jobs work between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So I'm there to help create a good, healthy working environment for people who work at night, and make sure that those who enjoy the nighttime economy have a safe and enjoyable experience within the city. All of the work that we do at Bristol City Council is underneath the banner of Bristol Nights. It's a partnership project from Bristol City Council that incorporates all sorts of different partners, including the police, the business improvement districts, Night Watch, the venues, the universities, charities that around women's safety or harm reduction, and we do a number of different campaigns. We've introduced a women's safety charter. I have some copies of which to share with you today, if you haven't seen the refreshed version. We have a citywide spiking campaign. 170 venues in the city have testing kits behind the bar, where if you think your drink has been tampered with, then you can test it straight away. We've been working in collaboration with the police on that. We have a harm reduction policy, the first city in the UK to have a citywide policy for the nighttime economy, and we do a number of different things within this realm. The partnership working is something that's actually really been proven to really demonstrate, to show that as a nighttime community, we're really working together to solve some of these common problems. The spiking scheme itself is a really good example of how this works. We had 3 objectives when that spiking campaign came through, and I've spoken to the committee about this before, one of which was to raise awareness in reporting, because we know that spiking is woefully underreported. When you look at the data, particularly in the city centre where we focus a lot of our efforts, we saw that data go right up, and that is on reported cases. So we know that through the coordinated partnership approach to some of the problems around public safety, around the 4 licensing objectives that we try to help businesses adhere to, that these partnership approaches really actually do have a very positive effect. Now, these are citywide campaigns, they're not just for the CIA area, and if we had a CIA or didn't have a CIA, Bristol Council would still be continuing to do this work underneath Bristol Knights. We would continue to do it. So I suppose what I'm trying to get to is that the CIA doesn't necessarily mean that the safety work completely stops if the CIA is abolished, but through your decision, we will continue to do that work. And I have some materials. Can I distribute them to members?
Sorry, you can bring leaflets if you want to distribute.
Yeah, apologies, sorry.
It's all publicly available online as well.
There's lots of pages to copy for other people who want to see it.
Do any of you have any questions to ask the officers?
Obviously, this...
Sorry,
Yeah, Fran, sorry.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a question for clarity, resulting from Councillor Stafford Townsend's public forum statement, and that was, they talked a lot about adapting the CIA, but as I understand it, it's pretty much a binary choice that we have. The CIA either exists or doesn't. Is that right?
In this particular iteration, yes. Your options today really are to retain it or remove it. If you wanted to make any changes to the cumulative impact assessment, you would have to undergo another full consultation on any proposed changes to it.
So on a similar vein, this is a question for Abby or Lynn, I'm not sure which. Currently the police can trigger a CIA. Is that set in legislation? Is there anyone else who can trigger it at the moment? Or can we make it so ourselves, or is that simply the way it is?
So the licensing authority sets the CIA, cumulative impact assessment, based on the evidence that comes forward, and that evidence can come forward from any party. So that is the police, any other responsible authorities, such as the licensing authority's responsible authority or environmental health, or indeed local residents, local businesses or local groups.
Okay, so isn't this the police who trigger?
No.
I've got 2 more questions. I understand that the CIA has not been successful in having an application refused for the last couple of years. I'll be interested in the views of why that is the case, because clearly the police they are requesting that we retain the CIA, but we don't seem to have much luck doing so, or implementing it over the last few years. It might be a question for the police. Can I ask the police that now? Or is that, do I have to go through the officer?
I think that may be a question for the police, Cam.
Hello, police. What's your views on that? Sorry, I wasn't too sure what the format was because we don't do this kind of thing very often. So, you know, given that you are requesting, and I can see all the evidence that the CIA has retained, yet we've had a number of times with speaking as someone sat in the licensing committee where it's been it's been set aside. What are your views on why it's been so unsuccessful over the last few years in preventing premises from opening? Thank you. One more question after this. Thank you.
Good morning. So just to introduce myself, my name is Dan Ashfield. I'm a police inspector and Fox lead for our licensing and the licensing team. So I'm here to support Neil in some of the data that he's passed. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's been unsuccessful because the CIA has allowed some of the licensing officers to negotiate certain times of opening and closing, the conditions of how that establishment works and the venue. So what it does is it gives them that kind of backing and support, excuse me, to not necessarily just refuse. So it allows a greater variety of establishments to open rather than just using it as a draconian close, and it won't happen. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's unsuccessful, it's just being used in that way.
So there are other benefits other than preventing the opening of,
yes,
what you're saying. Okay. Final question. In quite a few of the submissions, there's been reference to the economic impact of the CIA, people's fears that it will impinge on the development of the city centre. Where does that sit within the 4 licensing objectives? My understanding is that economic impact doesn't have much bearing on them, but I'm willing to be corrected. I'm not looking at either Lynn or Abigail. I mean, obviously we have sympathy with people trying to set up businesses, but is the economic impact of these things, is that our concern? Thank you.
It's not one of the 4 licensing objectives, Chair. I wonder if the Nighttime Economy Advisor may wish to address you on that point.
Well, I'm sorry, forgive me. It's actually a licensing question I have here, not a...
Yes,
I sympathise entirely with what you're saying, but is the economic survival of businesses in the city centre our concern within the licensing framework? So it's a Lynn or Abigail question, I'm afraid, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's not a licensing objective, but it may be that people would argue that the economic development of any city promotes and supports other aspects of that licensing regime, such as public safety, etc. But I can't speak to that in detail. I'm not an expert in that field.
Statement of licensing policy does talk about Bristol being a vibrant city centre and encouraging businesses to develop and encourage employment, etc. So that is something that is in the forefront, but as Abby said, it's not a licensing objective, so things like commercial need are not really relevant factors.
Thank you, that's exactly what I was after. You did much better than me then. Right, over to someone else.
Abby.
To be fair, Chairman, Councillor Brown made the point I was going to make, so that's fine. With respect though, this is a reconvened meeting. I think only Councillor Hacker and Councillor Hatch were at the last, so maybe we exhausted a lot of our questions to officers then. Perhaps we ought to move on to the debate. Obviously not.
Christine.
I've got a question for the officer down the end. I'm interested to understand your the evidence test that you're using and how it is that you've applied that when you say there isn't enough evidence for us to support retaining the CIA. That's my first question. And I think my second question really is for the licensing. Within the CIA, can you please clarify what the process is when a new application comes in? Because because my understanding is the CIA means that there is presumption to refuse unless there's some exceptions and some cases made. How is that different if it's listed?
I think if we go to Chris Winslow first for that answer.
Okay. Yeah. So in relation to the stats that we provided, when it comes to talking about the evidential test, we'll probably start talking around the noise aspect. It's the first aspect. If you look at the numbers provided, considering the number of premises that are within the area, we actually do see a low number of complaints relating to late night noise past 11 o'clock. We're not talking about earlier kind of activity, we're talking about that late night noise as linked to licensable activity, potential licensable activity which does include some kind of busking as well, so that street noise. So I understand that was one of the questions that was raised at the last hearing. Again, the cumulative impact is looking at that cumulative impact. When you have such a kind of a low number of reports that are being made and looking at kind of the trends, we are looking at kind of a downwards trend in relation to the number of complaints about specific late night premises. And that's what kind of the focus is on. Does not mean there isn't noise in the city centre, but in terms of the noise that could be directly linked to specific licensed premises or specific activity within such as busking, yeah, that's kind of what we'll be looking at and referring to. I've also referred into the stats in relation to, kind of, you talked about some kind of the joint working. It's a big thing that kind of the council is involved with, looking at kind of a tasking perspective of where the different responsible authorities and partners will come together to discuss issue premises and to decide kind of forms of actions through visits, informal action, through to formal warnings and potentially even through to kind of reviews that come through to yourselves. As you can see from kind of the stats provided, there was also kind of that downwards trend as well, and the large number of premises that I talked about in that multi-agency setting do sit outside kind of the current CIA area.
Can I come back on that? Yeah, so I'm still not clear what evidence test you're using. There's two evidence tests. It's either balance of probabilities, which can, in my mind could be the only one you're using. So is that the one you're using, balance of probabilities? That would be the evidence test in my mind. And saying that it's a low number, what are you comparing that with? What it was like 10 years ago? What another part of the city is like? I don't understand. I need something, in my mind, I need something what are you comparing it with when you're saying you can't support it because the evidence is not there?
Okay, so the context of the city as a whole, last year we dealt with, I think I've got the numbers, I've got another number, which was approximately 1,450 noise complaints across the city as a whole. As you can see from the stats I provided, only 12 related to noise complaints to deal with licensed premises during the hours of the CIA. I've also provided in the stats in my submission, kind of going back to 2017, that's the whole period that neighbour enforcement, and also covers the previous CIA areas, so you've kind of got that comparison. So, like I said, in 2023, there was only 12 noise complaints that were related to licensed premises, compared to 23 in kind of the previous year, 21, and kind of going backwards. So currently we're around 50% lower, so we're talking about kind of a cumulative impact across quite a large area, which if you kind of look at the map of the area that's covered, different areas, that's what we'll be looking at. So we're going by actual kind of, not kind of feeling, but by actual individual cases, investigations and the stats we're investigating.
Chair, may I ask a question, please? May I do that briefly, based on what the gentleman's just said?
That's fine, yeah.
Just a brief question. Human behaviour needs to be factored in. After 11 o'clock, very tired, busy families are trying to sleep. Sorry to say, in recent years, we haven't had the response when we've reported things, and so we've come to the conclusion there's no one out there that cares. I wondered if you factored in that we got very tired of trying to report things when nobody takes any notice, so we've had to deal with it. I've actually had to go round to bars myself to deal with it directly with the licence holder, and I don't feel the public should be put in that position yet. We do need to be taken into account, so perhaps I can talk to the police later about listening to our responses. But human behaviour, we've got very tired of reporting things that never get taken forward. Is that all right? That's my issue.
Guy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few, but I'll try and keep this brief.
Chair, apologies to interrupt Councillor Poultney. I think I just needed to clarify the second question for Councillor Townsend that she'd asked to the licensing officer in terms of process. Apologies, sorry. In terms of the process for a new application, whether it's in the CIA or not, the application is submitted, there is a consultation period. If no representations are received during that consultation period, it is granted. That's irrespective of whether there's a cumulative impact area or not. That's under the Act, that's a statutory requirement, we have no discretion over that. If representations are received and they mention cumulative impact in a CIA, then it comes before the committee, and the committee start from a position of refusal rather than a position of grant, but that is only if relevant representations are received.
Can you just outline what representation definition is?
So it would be so the reason we use representation is because it could be positive or negative, but essentially if I talk about objections, if that's more helpful, if an objection is received that relates to one or more of the 4 licensing objectives and is received within that consultation period. Yes, any person can make a representation, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Go.
Thanks, Chair. I'll ask Abby a quick one to start with, if that's okay. But how many reviews have we had over the last few years?
Is that within the cumulative impact area?
Ideally, yeah.
So we've had one that's definitely within the cumulative impact area, where members determined to add conditions to a licence where an outside area was causing issues, and one which was on the boundary of the cumulative impact area, and again members determined to add conditions to the licence.
Can I ask particularly, if you have the information to hand, who was it that triggered those reviews?
I believe that one of them was the public, and one of them, I believe, was the police, but I will ask my colleague to confirm that. Could we come back to that?
That'd be great. No, thank you. And for Mr. Swinscoe, I think no one's here to speak for environmental health, are they, or pollution?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay. Just looking at the 2 figures that in the papers on page 271, in terms of the number of visits carried out and the number of visits within the cumulative impact area and the deterioration from 2022 to 2023, and the number of premises visits between 2017 and 2023, could I ask what triggered those visits?
So our work has come from a number of factors. Some of it will be individual complaints that have come direct to the local authority, so in response to, that could be a response to do complaints to do about noise to do with premises, but also could be about kind of licensable activity, breach of licence conditions, but also it would also, a lot of our tasking will come from a multi-agency approach. So it's a fortnightly tasking meeting in which there's a number of representatives around the table, and we will talk about various places that we'll need a visit. And work out who's the best place to do it and who to tackle. So for example, if there might be aspects that would be interest to the police and the council, we would carry out joint visits. Then there also may be other activity which is more suitable for the fire brigade under the licence objectives to be following out. So that will be a lot of that direction will come from.
Okay, thank you. So could I ask in that context, do all of these figures relate to specific premises?
Yes, these are all these specific premises. So that the noise stats and the visits that are carried out, they all relate to specific premises.
So could I take it, in terms of your statement that the retention CIA is not required, that refers specifically to an evidence base that only includes complaints pertaining to specific licensed premises?
Yes.
So in other words, if there was, say, a cumulative impact that wasn't attributable to specific licensed premises, that wouldn't be in this report? Those figures wouldn't have been submitted to this committee? For example, the sorts of complaints that were referred to in public forum and from members of the public here today of things like late night noise of people walking past their houses shouting and screaming, the amount of litter on the streets on a Saturday or Sunday morning, those aspects of public nuisance and particularly waste enforcement, I think, which is obviously part of the MET's remit.
Yes,
if those weren't attributable to a specific licensed premises, we don't have evidence of it in front
of us. Of course, when we're looking at this, we're looking at what's kind of the licence objectives. So, for example, issues to do with waste is not a licensable objective. Noise in the street would be classed as a public order matter, which would be for the kind of the police, and I would assume amongst the stats that they provided, the information they provided to you today, those public order type offences and kind of public nuisance will be included in the stats provided. So whilst we may investigate noise, we deal with noise from licensed premises or domestic properties. We might deal with, again, the kind of what goes in the pub, some of the public realm, such as complaints around busking, but rowdy individuals that are associated with antisocial behaviour will not be included in this because that's not the remit of the local authority looking at it, or from neighbourhood enforcement or from a licensing objective. Those kind of public order elements, you kind of would assume that you would have to take the views of the police for those matters.
So, from the point of view of the council, then, or at least from the point of view of the neighbourhood enforcement team, those issues that people connect to the nighttime economy that are negative in terms of antisocial behaviour, waste in the streets, large groups of people hanging around the city centre at night, drunken rowdy behaviour, those sorts of things, that is not a public nuisance as far as the Bristol City Council is concerned for the purposes of this.
So when I'm counting my role as you as councillors, there'll be different hats that you wear. So for example, here I'm talking with my licensing authority, represent the licensing authority kind of opinion. Also, we do the investigations of which Environment and Health will make their decisions when it comes to making representations to kind of committee. We will do the investigatory steps. So those are the aspects that I'm talking you to today as. Not as an overarching local authority neighbour enforcement. It will be with kind of various hats on that I'll be wearing the same way that you will wear different hats when you're in very different committees about making various different decisions.
In which case, could I just check in with policy officers and our legal advisor? My assumption would be that in terms of the licensing objectives as they pertain to public nuisance, the council is the responsible authority in relation to that. In terms of public nuisance things like antisocial behaviour, like street waste, that are particularly a problem in the nighttime economy, with the nighttime economy, where would responsibility for submitting evidence of that to this committee sit?
In terms of public nuisance, that can encapsulate a number of things, and not just noise nuisance. It can relate to smells from commercial premises, and also littering, that type of thing. Noise from bottling up, not necessarily people shouting outside of premises or being noisy when they leave, so it can cover a whole range of issues. So in terms of where that sits, that could come from pollution control or the neighbourhood enforcement team, but it just depends on the evidence really. But it's the same, public nuisance can cover a whole range of issues. It's not just about noise from loud music from premises or patrons leaving and being a bit rowdy. It can include littering as well. And we do have, well, we don't use standard rules of conditions now, but we do have conditions that are sometimes imposed which do specifically relate to waste management issues, and that's generally to promote the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective.
Thank you. I suppose what I'm trying to get to is, we have a huge amount of public forum, both in the room, submitted to this committee, around these issues, and we don't seem to have any part of the council that's capable of speaking to this committee on those issues. If Mr. Swinscoe is saying that he is only able to speak to us about specific premises, that surely is exactly not the person evidence in terms of the cumulative impact being experienced. It should be impact that's not attributable to specific licensed premises.
The evidence does need to relate to specific premises when officers are investigating. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about here is two different types of public nuisance. We're talking about public nuisance under the Licensing Act as a licensing objective, and also public nuisance more generally within the city. And I think we need to just make it clear that what Mr. Swinscoe is talking about is public nuisance in relation to the licensing objective, and therefore related to specific licensed premises.
Sorry, just to add to that, the stats that the police provide include antisocial behaviour, and we break it down into environmental or nuisance or personal. So that's the three ways that we subdivide reported antisocial behaviour, and they're within the stats that are provided from the police perspective.
Sorry.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Do you mind repeating those three things? Sorry.
It's environmental, personal and nuisance.
Thank you.
Apologies, Chair, one final question, if that's okay. I was just wondering if Mr. Swinscoe would care to characterise the number of the resource available for this kind of activity, this kind of investigation in the NET, and how that resource level has been since, say, 2017 to 2023.
Okay, within neighbour enforcement, we've currently got 14 officers that will cover the city, of which kind of the team split of officers that will be looking at waste issues, and then officers that look at more nuisance and premises, so looking at kind of the ones kind of what's more property related issues and what kind of goes more on the street. What we have done is have kind of one officer that is mainly focused on the city centre location, and they would do more of a crossover on those aspects, because you can't have your, you might have your litter issues that might go to do with a licensed premises. The idea that is very, currently kind of very low, but we do have 13 officers covering the city.
Apologies. How many did you have? How many do you have now? How's that resource been over the last 7 years?
Over the last 7 years, it's fluctuated between 14, and during COVID period, we had up to 21 officers, and we're currently down to 13 officers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question to all of those departments over there. If the CIA is removed, what difference would that make to the input you put into that area? Would it change the amount of people you put in that area, the amount of work you do, the nighttime police and the council officer? Would it make any difference at all to you?
I'm happy to go first. It would not make any impact at all on the amount of resources and kind of focus that goes in. I understand one of the proposals is that the CIA, if the CIA was to be removed today, it would be removed in 6 months' time. Could be reviewed to see is there enough evidence. I think some of the aspects and the questions around kind of the evidence for keeping or removing around litter waste are factors that are not recorded by the local authority. So this is supposed to be an evidence-based process, and would have, if there are other matters that the committee would like to hear from, the local authority would have to work out, does it record that way, the information in a way that information could be obtained, rather than it being kind of a matter of kind of opinion or individual perspective. We would have to better look to see if we can actually get any evidence for that. As it stands, it would have no impact on the kind of resources that we would be targeting if the CIA existed inside, it existed or not.
And from a police point of view, there would be no immediate change in terms of resourcing on the nighttime economy. There is going to be a review this year into resourcing and how it is resourced. However, should the removal of the CIA happen and incidences do increase, then we would have to look at it, so it would be triggered based on the data, as opposed to if it's removed today, we would have to then put additional staff into the nighttime economy.
So from the perspective of myself as Nighttime Economy Advisor in Bristol, the CIA is, I don't just work within the CIA area, I will work across the whole of the city and represent the 116,000 people who work at night in Bristol and will continue to do so.
One more question. So at the moment, with the CIA, if an application comes in, it's refusal unless they can appeal against it. Is that correct?
Only if relevant representations are received, yes.
If we remove the CIA, it's then approval unless there's anybody objects. So that's the only change.
Yeah, so the change is at the committee point.
Yeah.
So the only change would be at the committee point, and members would look, instead of starting from a point of refusal down to grant, they would start at a point of grant down to refusal. It doesn't prevent anyone raising cumulative impact or raising the same sorts of concerns around noise or waste or any of those other concerns that they normally raise, and it doesn't prevent the police making representations in that normal way and making those negotiations in the normal way and presenting those to the committee. It simply changes your starting point.
Thank you. So the only difference is our starting point, and there will be no change in any the agencies put into that cumulative impact assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Emma.
Thank you. I just had a clarification point.
Sorry, Councillor.
Sorry. I just had a clarification point for what you just said. You said there was a review due in 6 months. Is that specifically relating to the impact of the CIA?
No, that's an overall. So it's a force-wide review of nighttime economy, how it's policed across the entire organisation.
But would it
necessarily impacted by the CIA?
But would the CIA be looked at as part of that wider? So a more comprehensive review of the effectiveness of the CIA could be found in that report in 6 months?
Potentially.
Okay, thank you.
return to what Chris was saying actually. So currently, when an application is made for a licence, then any problems around noise and what have you have to be, if it is not within the CIA, any problems of potential noise or what have you has to relate specifically to that premises. Correct, yeah? Because if there's, you can't just say it's general noise. But my understanding is that if there's a CIA in place, the rebuttable presumption makes any objection. There is a rebuttable presumption to refuse, isn't there? So it's less, you can rely more on an assumption that there's already a saturation point of noise, nuisance, etc., etc. So you have to have additional reasons to grant. So it is different in that you don't have to have specific allegations of noise or nuisance around a particular premises. You're nodding. My God, you're in agreement with her again, Richard. I'm feeling quite faint. So, he was not. How dare he? It's fascinating, but it's my broad understanding correct. So it does make a difference on how specific the objection has to be around the potential premises if it's in a CIA, because the presumption is to refuse.
So any representation would have to relate to the likely impact of the undermining of the licensing objectives for that premises. With a grant application, with a new application, it's obviously difficult to necessarily relate noise or crime disorder to that specific premises, but it does have to, the overall representation does have to relate to the likely impact for that premises. And that will be the same whether it's cumulative impact or not.
Guy.
I'm used to doing this at licensing. I think possibly in relation to that last point, but I thought I heard it said that it was possible to rate a cumulative impact as a factor in a specific application. Is that the case?
Yeah, so you have a cumulative impact assessment that covers a broad area, and if a representation is made that relates to cumulative impact within that area, then if it comes to you at committee, if a representation is made, if it comes to you at committee, then you start from that point of refusal because it's within a cumulative impact area. Any person outside of a cumulative impact area can raise the cumulative impact of premises in relation to an application that is submitted. The difference is it doesn't start from the point of refusal, but you can consider cumulative impact outside of a cumulative impact assessment.
That's very useful, thank you. And my question, I suppose, to all of the responsible authorities here would be, if, as one could reasonably assume, I think the point of removing the cumulative impact area policy would be to make it easier for new venues to start up, greater numbers, less regulated and fewer conditions. In those cases, I suppose what I'm asking is, would the areas for which you're responsible become easier or harder to manage? That's to say, if there were less regulated premises, would that make things more or less difficult for neighbourhood enforcement, the police, my time economy?
I'm not necessarily sure that the regulations would be any different, because the Licensing Act is quite clear on what the 4 licensing objectives are for any premises, whether they're inside a CIA or not. But on the question of diversifying the nighttime economy and improving the offer within the city centre, being able to make it easier for new licensed premises to come through would enable us to diversify the offer so that there can be different things for people to go to, and perhaps different times of day in which that the staggered closing times are. I would think that would improve the different types of things that people go to and improve the general environment for the nighttime economy, particularly in the city centre.
It's quite difficult to answer, as you can probably imagine, because it's very hypothetical, but if there are more venues, if there are more people, if there is more egress transition of people from club to pub to venue, then it is going to be slightly more difficult to police, just based on pure numbers alone. And if we don't have the necessary control on certain venues and numbers, that could cause us an impact, but that is hypothetical and that would be based on trend. But then, on the other hand, you could be quite right in the greater variety that it would bring, but I wouldn't say that that's curtailed now. I think that there is a great variety in Bristol city centre, and I think there are lots of different venues coming through, so I don't see the CIA as necessarily curtailing that variety.
Just from our perspective, there would be no change in terms of the regulation of its individual premises. Each individual licence would have its conditions. It does not mean there's more conditions or less conditions. So it would have an impact. One of the things that would be kind of very noticeable though is there would be potentially more eyes and ears on the streets of Bristol, more the door staff looking for people who could be vulnerable and support. As I said, if you look at kind of the current area, and if someone provided a map of all the licensed premises and showed all the dead zones that are within, which are not unlit, as people kind of traverse the CI area and move around the city, there are a number of places where currently actually, it's dark streets, and actually if there was more licensed premises that were open later at night, there might actually be more kind of eyes and ears that help to assure to do the reporting, because currently we have a number of areas where there is, like I said and talked earlier, of kind of places where illicit activity could be occurring where people are vulnerable, especially as I talked around kind of water safety. I think we think about the number of people, unfortunately, who have lost their lives on the harbour side as they've gone to one part of the nighttime economy and then have been trying to make their way home and unfortunately have ended up falling into the harbour side. And in those areas, there isn't anyone else to be on the lookout for them, and and the police cannot be everywhere. And we do not have Big Brother with CCTV covering every single eventuality of the city centre to be able to look out for those individuals.
Thank you.
Sorry, I appreciate I'm testing colleagues' patience. I will be done soon. I really feel the need to make sure the evidence that we've got is clear. I promise this will be the last.
Political promise, or is it really?
It's a real promise.
After your question, we can move on.
That's fine. Because in relation to the specific case that you just mentioned, there have been cases of people dying on their way home from the nighttime economy. Can I ask, did you call a review of any specific premises in relation to those deaths? Was that attributable to any specific venue in the nighttime economy?
That's not something that I'm personally aware of. It's not something that would have been raised by ourselves, and not something that we would have been looking into. No, we have not.
So just to be clear, there could be a death as a result of the nighttime economy, and this council would not capture that or feel that that was pertinent to the review of the policy of this area.
It's not a factor that I've taken in terms of representing here.
Can I just respond on the element of water safety for night time? Because you might have seen the Bristol rules around the city centre. We have lots of nighttime safety messaging that we put all around the city centre, which includes a specific mention for water safety. I know that the Business Improvement District in the city centre does a lot of training with those waterfront bars in terms of line throwing and things like that to try and deal with people who have found themselves into trouble in the water. So there is actually quite a lot of work on the element of water safety that we do with licensed premises to try and make sure that people are spotting people who are in trouble in the water. But we do have miles of waterways that are not necessarily under view when the sun has gone down.
Can I just come back on the query regarding the reviews? We had two reviews, as I mentioned. Both were submitted by members of the public or councillors.
Before we move on to the debate, Christine, just one more question for you.
It's referring back to the limitations placed within the CIA if it's retained. The concept that a premises is offering something with a different clientele or something that doesn't already exist within the CIA is already my understanding, and it's a kind of permitted exception and helps the licensing committee get to the place of grantation anyway, even if it's within the CIA. Can you just confirm that, please?
That is right. If it also encourages a greater variety of entertainment or it's more family friendly, it can be treated as an exception. But the onus is on the individual applicant to satisfy the members that their individual application ought to be treated as an exception to council policy. So there's a shifting of the burden of proof where there's a CIA. The burden of proof is where a policy applies, and this is general case law, not just in relation to cumulative impact policies, where a policy bites and an exception is being sought to the policy, then the burden of proof is on the individual applicant to satisfy the decision maker that their application should be treated as an exception to the policy without undermining it or the reasons that underlie it.
Thank you. That concludes the questions. We will move on.
I can reassure you, Chairman, I'm going to engage in debate, not actually ask a question. Committee actually deferred a decision on the CIA on the 25th of January for 3 reasons. Firstly, members were disappointed by, frankly, the pitiful response from council departments to the original consultation. May I thank officers for providing that today. I have to say, I don't think my view has changed as a result of that information, but can I thank them? Secondly, members still on balance, we didn't have a consensus to move for such a fundamental change. 2 members had to leave, so we just have half our membership when we had the vote. So at least we have a better attendance today, so that's great. But crucially, and Councillor Putney spoke eloquently about that, he felt it was utterly unfair for us to make such a fundamental change when Bristolians and people who live and work in central Bristol were not actually able to give their views. So I thank the 5 Bristolians who spoke today, but the significant number who submitted statements, which I'm sure all members have taken into account. In my view, that was very material. We've heard from the police they believe the CIA in central Bristol is essential for them to do their job. We've also heard from people who live in central Bristol of the devastating impact badly managed licensed premises can make on their lifestyles. And to me, that's got to be key. We've heard before that the CIA is a blunt instrument. I don't actually think it is. I've sat on plenty of licensing panels over the last few years which have actually either refused or believed they've carefully looked at the evidence and believed that the CIA trigger wasn't actually, or qualification wasn't triggered, and we've adjusted the conditions. As we've heard from the inspector, even the threat of it has been helpful to them in negotiating tightened conditions, of course. I gravely feel, we've heard the consultation, 2/3 of respondees have said don't ditch it. We've heard from people today whose lifestyles will be hugely adversely affected. I'm afraid my experience of the council is sometimes the council consults and then ignores. Please don't do that today. Listen to what Bristolians are saying to us. I believe the evidence the police submitted was substantive and convincing. I will be voting actually to retain the CIA. I urge you to do likewise.
Thanks, Richard. I wasn't at the last meeting because I was away, but as I understand it, there's been additional evidence provided by the police to support their view that the CIA should be retained. Am I correct? I am correct in that, I'm thinking that, aren't I? So there seems to be some quite extensive facts and figures from the police to support their view, in addition to which there's been a significant input from local residents. So I'm slightly at a loss as to what will convince us to abandon the CIA. It's not a perfect tool. But I've actually found the police response quite helpful in terms of it's not just about refusing licences, it's about giving officers more grist behind the scenes to impose more stringent conditions. So, to be honest, I came in thinking I wasn't too keen on the idea, but now I think I'm going to be, once again, to my horror, voting the same way as my Conservative colleague Richard. Thank you.
Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the extra information from all departments, which was very helpful. As Richard said, we didn't really have enough at the last meeting. But listening to what everybody has said, there's not going to be any reduction in any input resources if we remove it. Actually, by the sound of it, there might even be, from our officer, there might even be more power to the elbow of the public to actually refuse these things. So the only difference is, in my opinion, removing it, was that we start at a stance to approve unless there's any objections. So I can't see a point, and to get a proper public consultation, if we come back in 12 months and do a full public consultation again, you will get more, we know whether it's beneficial or not from the police and from other organisations. So I'm quite happy to move that we remove the CIA and come back in 12 months with a review.
Guy?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm finding this a little bit bizarre, not least the consensus breaking out between Councillor Eddy and the Greens, as wonderful as it is. The evidence from the police makes sense to me. It reflects the reality that I see. If you go out on a Friday or Saturday night, you see what the police are telling us, you see what the public health evidence is telling us, you see what the statements from members of the public are telling us. I am more than a little concerned that we still have no representative from pollution control coming to this committee, which I think is a great shame. In terms of what we've heard from the neighbourhood enforcement team, I think there might be a little bit of a breakdown in that, insofar as what my understanding of the cumulative impact policy is intended to reduce harm caused by the impact of the nighttime economy premises within the CIA as a whole. In other words, if there were issues pertaining to specific premises, that would be dealt with by review. And NET obviously haven't called any reviews, the council hasn't called any reviews, those all come from the police or from members of the public. But I think when the public complain about late night noise, I think when they complain about the volume of litter in the streets, I think when we see the number of people in A&E on a Friday or Saturday night with head injuries, or who are very intoxicated, or when we see large groups of people in the city centre, not those ones who are very, very intoxicated, there's an assumption that the council is capturing that information. Because this committee and this specific hearing is exactly where one would expect that evidence to come. I know that when my residents report to things like Operation Beach, they expect that information to be retained somewhere, and seemingly the council does not feel that it's for this committee to see that evidence, unless it specifically relates to a specific premises, which is not what we're here to look at. So I'm slightly abashed that the main voice calling for us to retain the CIA has not necessarily engaged with the cumulative impact beyond specific licensed premises. But here we are. I'd just very quickly like to say a big thank you to Annie McGann and Leighton de Burger from Save Bristol's Nightlife and the Night Watch group, who have been incredibly helpful in informing my view on the nighttime economy as it currently stands. Bristol has had the most amazing nightlife offer over the last few decades. It's been an extraordinary cultural benefit to the city, and in large part that came from the diversity of that offer. I feel exactly diametrically opposed to the council's nighttime economy advisor on this. I think the nighttime economy, my experience of working in it for a very long time, tends towards monoculture. The most money is to be made by high volume, vertical drinking, very noisy establishments. And the creation of the cumulative impact area and the acknowledgement that that, getting as big as it did not that long ago, was part of the problems that the city was experiencing. And the introduction of the cumulative impact area in ensuring that diversity, because of the rebuttable presumption, and reducing harm, improved our nighttime economy. and actually has made it better and safer and healthier. I don't want a completely safe nighttime economy, but looking at what the police are saying, there is a huge risk, I think, in abandoning the policy that has brought us to where we are now. What we need to be doing is supporting the nighttime economy. This is really clear. We'll be looking at tables and chairs on the highways soon, which is great. But there are so many more things that we could do to support the nighttime economy, and I'm worried that opening the door to less regulated, less safe, larger premises coming back into the city.
What does it say that? Anywhere?
That's the whole point of what is being proposed. Is going to cause more problems than it's worth. I'm in tune with Councillor Eddy. I think this committee needs to do a lot more to support the nighttime economy, and frankly I find myself in significant agreement with a submission from TLT. That is to say, we need a more nuanced cumulative impact policy, and we really need to start developing that evidence base. So I would, as a sort of counter to Councillor Jackson's proposal, say that what I would like to propose is that we extend the existing cumulative impact policy for an additional year, say, in order to enable us to begin a targeted evidence gathering approach, a proper public consultation, to look at what a more nuanced, tiered CIA could look like, so that we could ensure that diversity improves as we move forward. Thanks.
Brenda, sorry.
I'd just like to quote from a paragraph in the papers, which I think Lynn will recognise. The absence of a CIA does not prevent any person or responsible authority from making representations on an application for the grant of or variation of a licence on the grounds that the premises will give rise to a negative cumulative impact on one or more of the licensing objectives. And I would like to suggest that we trial not having a CIA policy in place for a year, 6 months or a year, and then review it again at the end of that time and see what difference it's made. Because all the applications we've had so far, it hasn't really made that much of an impact whether we did it or not. So that's my view.
Okay. Emma.
Thank you. I think the problem is it's down to evidence again, isn't it? And there is a lot of people saying, well, there's no evidence that the CIA does anything good, so let's abolish it. But on the other side, the small amount of evidence we do have comes from the police and comes from anecdotal evidence of residents, which is why we had a consultation in the first place. I think what I've heard a lot more of today is that there is a need for review and reform and more nuance. So the real question is, while we do that, which I think should happen either way, do we keep the CIA and look at it and review and reform, or do we scrap it, like Brenda says, and then review and reform? My concern is, if the police are correct, and the CIA does help them manage the nighttime economy in terms of safety, in terms of looking after people, we are putting people at risk for a year while we decide whether or not it's working. Whereas if we keep it and look at ways to reform it and renew it, we at least have that safety valve for the police. The fact that you said that in 6 months' time you're doing a review which will also look at the CIA, I would like to see that report before we make a decision to get rid of the CIA, because that is a safety valve as far as I'm concerned. What I heard from the nighttime economy advisor I actually think is great, but by what she has said, it would be great regardless whether there was a CIA or not. All of this stuff is happening outside of the CIA as well as within it, so it's not really that relevant to this argument. I did actually have, the one thing that did kind of sort of make me think about the CIA on the other side is this idea of dead spots, this idea that there's streets where there's no, there aren't often no venues, and it would be good to have some venues there because it creates a bit. But as you say, there are signs up now. There are posters. There are other devices that you can do to keep people safe in those dead spots, apart from just open and load more venues. So that's kind of addressed some of my fears there. I think we could probably also do more other than just open venues, we can look at things more like more CCTV cameras, more of this public awareness. This public awareness stuff I think is great, but I think it's great regardless of whether or not there is a CIA. So I think we definitely do need to look at this more. We need to get that report in 6 months from the police to see to get more evidence of what the exact impact is. It might be that it's not right, it might be that something else needs to happen, but let's keep it while we do that review, just so that we're giving the police more support. I think the police could do more with more support, they've asked for it, and also to reassure residents that we are also listening to them as well. Thank you.
Another quick point related to what you're saying. I mean, I do appreciate what Brenda's suggesting, that we suspend, we revoke it for a year to see what happens, but if we get rid of the CIA for a year and as a result that additional premises are open, what happens to those premises at the end of the year? And what happens to the addition? Because if we have less regulation than we did before, or less or fewer powers, that does suggest that any more premises or more liberal, shall we say, opening hours. So what happens at the end of that year? Do they get closed down? Do they get reviewed? It doesn't seem right to me that we lift it whilst we think about this. And also, whilst I'm sympathetic to the idea of there being more eyes on the street, more venues, we're not going to have, if you look at the waterfront, there's no way we're going to get venues all around the edge of the waterfront, and that's not actually desirable either. Because the increase in venues required to cover all those dead spots and quiet alleys is just mind-bending, and I don't think that's going to be a useful way forward. So once again, I'm going to be voting for the retention of the CIA.
Very quickly, I don't know whether it scares you more, Fee, or me, that I do tend to agree with you at the moment. Seriously, though, I've not actually changed my position at all. But I would just urge members, there have been a few things floated which has talked about 6 monthly or a year review, and I do get rather nervous that we are being asked by the officers either to ditch or to retain the CIA. Can I respectfully remind members that in just over 2 months' time, we have all up elections, a new council, new councillors. I would be very reluctant, in fact I wouldn't seek at all to bind them to the views of members who are elected now. So I think for the sake of our residents, for businesses, I don't think we need to muddy the water. Let's just vote to retain or to ditch. In my view, it's clear we should retain.
Sorry, sorry.
Thank you. That was me you were talking to, was it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'll be very brief and say that I've listened to my fellow councillors speaking, and I have quite a considerable amount of sympathy in what they're expressing, in as much as it's a very difficult question. I have to say it's been presented by the council in not the least difficult way to be decided upon. However, I don't believe that we can decide today to defer or do anything else. We have 2 proposals in front of us which were brought forward from the last meeting which was voted on, and they are, we keep it or we lose it. And that's it. We can't do anything else.
Thank you. That's right, we have 2 proposals in front of us, and I approach this issue with an open mind. I'm aware of the importance of the hospitality sector to the local economy, and I believe that we should do everything we can to support the hospitality sector. As a free marketer, I don't normally believe in putting obstacles in the way of business, and I think that if the market is its saturation point, then that in itself would be a barrier to the successful entry of new participants. So I was open, or I was receptive to the idea of scrapping the CIA. But having said that, the results of the consultation are perfectly clear, and I think that they should be taken account of. The public forum responses, I think, give us considerable food for thought, and they're unambiguous. And I also attach considerable weight to the representation from the police, and that's for obvious reasons. They're the ones who are on the ground. So having weighed all that up, on balance, I'm in favour of retaining the CIA.
Guy, then Brenda.
Thanks, Chair. So I agree completely with Councillor Eddy and Windows. I think we need to make a decision today, and there are only two options in front of us, which is to retain or to scrap the cumulative impact area policy. And I think it's become fairly clear I think we should retain it, absolutely. However, one of the things that's come out of this process that's given me really serious cause for concern are the statements from within the nighttime economy, certainly from Night Watch, that there are apparently really good premises that wouldn't contribute to the harm in the area that are being put off from applying because of the way that the policy is being perceived, that it's designed to target them, and even the submission from TLT solicitors, chambers, solicitors, law firms, makes it really clear that what the nighttime economy is seeking in some way is some sort of statement from this committee that says, no, we want to hear from those premises. If there are exciting new diverse premises that we want to come in front of the licensing committee, we want to see them. We actively want to support them. It's harmful and damaging premises that harm the licensing, and the licensing objectives that we want to keep out with this policy, and that is what this policy should be doing. So, as I say, I would again propose that we retain the current CIA, but I would really like to see an evidence base and work on that evidence base start. So, as Councillor says, the next chair of the licensing committee can have something on their desk or an agenda item on the first papers that calls for a review of the CIA policy and starts collecting evidence base around specific harm and what kind of premises we wish to see. And I think we should make that statement as soon as we possibly can. If the committee can accept that element of it, I would like to formally propose that we retain the CIA and add that piece of work to the licensing committee's to-do list.
Could I second Guy's proposal?
Brenda.
It was just a follow-up to the response to what I said about what happens after a year. Do we close them down? Why would you want to close them down if they were operating perfectly normally? If there's
a cumulative impact arising from it, it's what we want to do.
Well,
Okay, so we're ready for vote?
Yeah.
Okay, so the vote is for the officer recommendation to
Microphone.
retain sorry. Okay, did it myself that time. Okay, so the recommendation in the report is whether to retain or remove.
Yes, sorry.
No. Yeah. Yes, the recommendation was whether to retain or remove the current cumulative impact assessment in respect of the City Centre of Bristol. So in that case, we will do a vote on whether we want to retain this.
Sorry, just to clarify, isn't there the option as per item 16 in the papers to retain or remove the CIA and request officers and partners monitor and review the data for coming? So it's either remove or retain it or remove it, but with that monitoring and going forward.
I think, sorry, apologies, I think Councillor Poultney has moved the motion to remove the cumulative impact area site, and it was seconded by Councillor Eddy, so I think it's a motion and a vote on that motion.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said a vote to retain the CIA.
Sorry, yes, that's
And if you're aware, I'm sure the Chairman, understanding orders of convention is not just a convention, the rule is a properly moved and seconded motion needs to be put immediately to the vote.
So, the vote that you are taking right now is to retain the CIA as it currently stands. Okay, that's the only vote we're doing. With
Can they put their hand?
To retain the CIA and begin the process of collecting an evidence base for a review.
Sorry, because the report said that you would, if you removed it, then you would collect the evidence base. So we're just slightly changing the recommendation. So the vote.
It's not a recommendation.
Okay, right. So a motion to retain the CIA and begin the process of collecting an evidence base for review from the new administration.
For the new licensing committee.
Yeah. For review for the future licensing committee. Okay, can you please raise your hand if you are for retaining the CIA? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Please raise your hand if you are against retaining the CIA. 1, 2, 3, 4. Please raise your hand if you abstain from voting. So it's passed.
That concludes the meeting.
Thanks for your time and input.